The airport went silent when my baby cried with the scent of the family that had abandoned us. It happened at Gate 47, under the cold white lights of JFK, while rain crawled down the glass walls and planes waited on the runway like sleeping giants. I had Luca pressed against my chest, his tiny fist twisted in the collar of my hoodie, his cheeks red from exhaustion after a 3-hour delay. I was trying to disappear into the line for Chicago, trying to keep my head down, trying not to look toward the private aviation lounge where the Hayes family name glowed in silver letters above the frosted doors. Then Rowan Hayes walked out in his pilot uniform, tall and perfect and impossible, carrying the scent I had spent a year trying to forget. Cedarwood, cold air, worn leather from a flight jacket. Luca's cry broke open like a siren. It was not just fear. It was recognition. The scent that poured from him was small, sweet, and unmistakably wrapped in the Hayes bloodline. Every alpha in the lounge turned. A gray-haired man in a navy overcoat stood so quickly his suitcase tipped over beside him. His eyes locked on Luca, then on Rowan, and his voice cut through the boarding announcements like a verdict. That child smells like our bloodline. My whole body went cold. Rowan stopped mid-step, one hand still holding his captain's cap, his steel blue eyes finding mine through the crowd. For 1 second, I saw the man I had loved. Then the pilot returned, controlled, distant, trained to survive emergencies by naming them before feeling them. Elias, he said, as if my name belonged on an incident report. His gaze dropped to Luca. What is this? I tightened my arms around my son. Do not. People were watching now. Business travelers, flight attendants, a family with matching backpacks, 2 security officers near the wall. I could feel their curiosity pressing against my skin. An Omega alone with a crying baby. An alpha pilot from one of the most powerful aviation families in the country. A scent no one could pretend was ordinary. Rowan took 1 step closer, and Luca's cry shifted, softer for half a breath, almost reaching for him. That hurt more than the noise. How old is he? Rowan asked. His voice was low, but everyone near Gate 47 heard it. Before I could answer, the frosted doors opened again, and Victoria Hayes stepped out like winter had learned to wear pearls. Rowan's mother had not changed in a year. Cream coat, silver hair, calm mouth, eyes sharp enough to cut paper. She looked at Luca once and understood everything. Then she looked at me with the same polite disgust she had worn the night my life split in two. 1 year earlier, I had stood under the departure sign at this same airport with a pregnancy test folded inside a paper envelope, waiting for Rowan after his red-eye briefing. I had rehearsed the words until my throat ached. I am pregnant. It is yours. I am scared, but I wanted you to know first. He had arrived in uniform, beautiful and exhausted, smelling like storms above the clouds. But before I could speak, his phone buzzed, his expression hardened, and he looked at me like I had become a delay he could not afford. I cannot let you do this to my career, he said. Do what? I whispered. His jaw tightened. Use an Omega crisis to tie me down. He walked through the crew-only doors before I could tell him there was already a heartbeat inside me. Minutes later, a message came from his number. Do not wait for me. Do not use a child to chain me. I left the airport in the rain with the envelope crushed in my hand and a secret growing beneath my heart. Now that secret was crying in my arms, filling Gate 47 with the truth. Rowan stared at Luca like the ground had vanished beneath his polished shoes, and Victoria's voice slid into the silence. Elias, step away from the child before this becomes more embarrassing than it needs to be. Luca stopped crying for 1 impossible second and reached his tiny hand toward Rowan. I pulled Luca back against my chest before his fingers could reach Rowan, because my son was too young to understand that some hands could feel like home and still have once let you fall. His tiny palm closed on empty air. The sound he made next was not loud, but it struck me harder than his crying. It was a broken little whimper, confused and searching, as if his body had recognized a door that my heart refused to open. Rowan heard it too. Something moved across his face, fast and painful, before discipline locked it away. Elias, he said again, softer this time. How old is he? Victoria answered before I could. This is not the place. Her voice was calm, polished, made for boardrooms and donor dinners. But the alpha relatives behind her were no longer looking at me like a stranger. They were looking at Luca, at his pale cheeks, his dark lashes, the faint steel blue ring around his eyes that had grown more visible each month. They were breathing in the scent no blanket, hoodie, or airport crowd could hide now. Cedarwood, cold air, worn leather, haze. The gray-haired man who had spoken first took a slow step forward. "Rowan," he said, voice low with disbelief. "That child has your grandfather's scent." Rowan's fingers tightened around his captain's cap. "Uncle Grant, not now." "When then?" the man asked. "After she leaves with him?" "She, not he." The mistake scraped across my already raw nerves, but I had no room to correct him, no room to explain anything while Luca's heartbeat fluttered against my wrist like a trapped bird. I shifted the diaper bag higher on my shoulder and reached blindly for the stroller handle. "I am going to miss my flight." "You are not boarding until we understand what is happening," Victoria said. That was when the old fear tried to rise. The same fear from 1 year ago, when I had stood beneath the departure sign with a paper envelope hidden inside my coat. I remembered the smell of wet wool, airport coffee, and jet fuel drifting through automatic doors. I had been 24, scared, and foolish enough to believe love meant being heard. Rowan had just come off a training week in Seattle. His schedule had been brutal, his family was pushing him toward a promotion, and I had waited outside the crew corridor for nearly 2 hours because security would not let me through. When he finally appeared, he looked exhausted but beautiful, uniform sharp, tie loosened, the silver wings on his chest catching the light. My whole body had wanted to run to him. Then he looked at his phone. Whatever he read turned his eyes cold before I said a single word. "Not here," he had said. I thought he meant the crowd. I thought he would take me somewhere private. Instead, he kept walking. I followed him beneath the glowing departures board, past rolling suitcases and tired travelers, trying to make my voice work. "Rowan, please, I need to tell you something important." He stopped so suddenly, I almost collided with him. When he turned, the man I loved was gone behind an Alpha trained to cut through turbulence without flinching. "My mother told me you went to the family office." I blinked. "I went because I could not reach you. You asked about benefits, housing, legal recognition. I asked where you were." His jaw tightened. "Do not make this ugly, Elias." My hand closed over the envelope under my coat. Inside was the first ultrasound, barely more than a bright blur and a heartbeat line, but to me it was already the center of the universe. "I am not trying to make anything ugly." "Then do not use your status as an Omega to corner me in an airport." The announcement for Flight 218 to London crackled overhead. "Final boarding. Crew requested at gate." Rowan glanced toward the restricted doors, and I knew he was already leaving me before his feet moved. "I have a flight," he said. "Rowan, wait." He did not. He walked through the crew-only entrance, and the door sealed behind him with a soft mechanical click. 5 minutes later, the message arrived from his number, colder than the tile beneath my shoes. "Do not wait for me. Do not use a child to chain me." Back at gate 47, the memory dissolved under Luca's trembling breath. I looked at Rowan, then at Victoria, and my voice came out steady enough to surprise us all. "He is 11 months old." Rowan went still. His uncle closed his eyes. Victoria's perfume sharpened beneath her pearls. And Luca, as if tired of adults failing him, turned his face toward Rowan and whispered his first clear word in public. "Duh." The word was so small it should have vanished beneath the boarding announcement, but it reached every corner of gate 47 like a flare in the dark. DeLuca said it once, then tucked his face against my hoodie as if the sound had frightened him too. Rowan did not breathe. His captain's cap slipped from his hand and landed on the polished floor without anyone moving to pick it up. For the first time since I had known him, the Skytrained Alpha looked like a man who had forgotten how to stand on the ground. "He has never said that before," I whispered, and I hated that my voice broke on the truth. Victoria's eyes narrowed immediately. "Babies make sounds. This proves nothing." Uncle Grant turned toward her slowly. "Victoria." "No," she said, still calm, still elegant, still poisonous beneath the perfume. "No one will turn a delayed commercial gate into a family tribunal because an Omega appears with a child at a convenient moment." Convenient. The word opened something in me. For 11 months, nothing had been convenient. Not the apartment in Newark with a heater that clicked all night, but barely warmed the floor. Not the hospital forms where I left the father's line blank because the nurse kept glancing at my empty ring finger. Not the night Luca's fever hit 103 degrees and I walked 6 blocks through sleet to the urgent care because the rideshare app declined my card. Not the mornings I stocked shelves at a 24-hour pharmacy after sleeping in pieces, 20 minutes here, 40 minutes there, Luca strapped to my chest beneath my coat, while a kind manager pretended not to notice. I looked at Victoria and felt the old fear step back. Do not call my son convenient. Rowan's head turned toward me. Something in his expression shifted, not enough to erase the past, but enough to show he had heard the years inside that sentence. Luca whimpered again, his tiny body trembling as the scents around us sharpened. My own scent must have cracked through my blocker, warm rain and anxious vanilla, because several alphas nearby lowered their eyes out of instinctive courtesy. Rowan noticed that too. He took a step back instead of forward, putting space between his alpha presence and my son's distress. The movement was small, but it mattered. I hated that it mattered. Elias, he said, voice rough now. The message. Show me. I almost laughed. Now you want to read it? Yes. You had a year. I thought you were gone. I was gone because you told me to go. His face tightened. If I sent that, I need to see it. The word if made Victoria's perfume sharpen again. I felt it before I saw her glance at the phone in my hand. That was when the first crack appeared in the story she had built. I shifted Luca to one arm and pulled out my phone with the other. The screen was smudged, the case cracked at one corner from the day I dropped it in a grocery store parking lot while trying to open a bottle one-handed. I had kept the message buried in an archived thread, never deleted, never answered. Some wounds you keep because proof matters more than peace. I opened it and turned the screen toward Rowan. Do not wait for me. Do not use a child to chain me. The timestamp glowed beneath it. 11:42 p.m. 1 year ago. Rowan stared at it. His brows drew together, not in denial now, but calculation. Pilot calculation. Flight time. Gate time. Systems. Logs. The world reduced to records that could not be softened by tears. That is impossible, he said. Victoria gave a small sigh. Rowan, really? He ignored her. My London flight pushed back at 11:31. We were taxiing at 11:42. Personal phones are off and sealed in the cockpit locker until cruising altitude. Uncle Grant stepped closer. You are certain? Rowan's eyes did not leave the screen. I signed the safety checklist myself. My grip tightened around Luca. Then who sent it? The question had barely left my mouth when a young gate agent in a Navy uniform stepped forward from behind the counter, her face pale with nerves. Captain Hayes, she said quietly. There may be a backup device record. Executive crew accounts mirror through the family office. Victoria turned toward her, and the girl flinched, but did not step back. Rowan looked at his mother then, really looked at her, and the silence between them felt colder than the rain against the glass. Mother, he said, why would my private line mirror through your office? Victoria did not answer Rowan right away, and that silence told me more than any confession could have. Around us, Gate 47 had become a glass box full of held breath. The rain blurred the runway lights into long silver lines, and the delayed Chicago passengers stood frozen with their boarding passes in hand, watching a family secret unfold beneath the departures board. Luca had gone quiet against my chest, but his tiny fingers were still tangled in my hoodie, his scent flickering between fear and that unmistakable cedarwood thread that made every Hayes Alpha in the area look unsettled. Rowan's question remained in the air. Why would my private line mirror through your office? Victoria smoothed one gloved hand over the sleeve of her cream coat. Because the Hayes family does not leave its heirs exposed to scandal, technical breaches, or emotional manipulation. Rowan's face hardened. That is not an answer. It is the only answer that matters in public. She looked past him at me, and her expression softened into something that almost resembled pity. Elias, you should have accepted help when it was offered properly. A cold shiver moved down my back. Properly. Housing assistance. Medical discretion. A clean relocation. You were young, emotional, and clearly overwhelmed. I tried to prevent exactly this spectacle. The words slid through me like airport air conditioning, clean and freezing. I remembered the envelope that had appeared 3 weeks after Luca was born, slipped under the door of my apartment in Newark while I was washing bottles in the sink. No return address. No signature. Inside was a cashier's check and a typed note. Leave the East Coast before the child becomes a legal complication. I had torn the check into pieces while Luca slept in a laundry basket lined with towels because I could not afford a proper bassinet yet. I had told myself it was a threat from someone who knew too much. Now I knew it had been an invitation to erase myself politely. You call that help? I asked. My voice was calm, and that scared me less than trembling would have. Victoria's eyes narrowed. I call it mercy. Rowan turned to her fully then, and the controlled pilot mask slipped just enough for pain to show through. You knew there was a child. I knew there was a possibility. You knew, he repeated. Uncle Grant took off his glasses and rubbed a hand over his face. The gate agent, still pale, tapped quickly at the terminal computer. Captain Hayes, she said, I can request the archive, but I need authorization from family security. Victoria's gaze snapped to her. You will do no such thing. The young woman swallowed, but Rowan had already stepped to the counter. Use my authorization. Rowan, Victoria said, sharper now. Enough. He did not look back. No. It was enough 1 year ago when he stood in this airport alone because someone decided my life for me. My throat tightened, but I refused to cry. Not here. Not under these lights. Not while Luca was watching me with sleepy, confused eyes that looked too much like Rowan's. The gate agent typed, her fingers shaking. A minute passed. Then another. The boarding screen above us changed from delayed to awaiting crew, and a murmur spread through the passengers, but no one moved away. Finally, the printer behind the counter clicked to life. The gate agent lifted a single sheet and read it twice before handing it to Rowan. The message was sent from a mirrored executive device registered to Hayes' Aviation Family Office, she said. Access badge used at that time belonged to Victoria Hayes. The words were not loud, but they hit the gate harder than thunder. Rowan stared at the paper. Victoria's perfume sharpened into something bitter beneath the roses. Administrative access does not prove intent, she said. No, Rowan replied, voice low. But it proves you lied. Luca shifted in my arms and reached again, not toward Victoria, not toward the crowd, but toward Rowan. This time Rowan did not move closer. He looked at me first. Not as a pilot. Not as a Hayes. As a man asking permission, he should have asked a year ago. I did not know why I nodded. Maybe because Luca was exhausted. Maybe because the truth had already taken so much from us. Rowan stepped forward slowly, stopping a foot away. He did not touch my son. He only lowered his scent, softening the sharp alpha edge until cedar wood and cold air became something gentle, like a coat held open in winter. Luca's eyes fluttered. His crying stopped completely. The entire gate watched my baby calm in the presence of the father who had never held him. Rowan's face broke. Not dramatically, not loudly, just one breath, uneven and devastated. Victoria saw it and finally lost her polish. If you acknowledge that child here, you damage everything this family built. Rowan looked at Luca, then at me, then at the captain's cap lying on the floor where he had dropped it. Then maybe it was built too high above the people it should have protected. The intercom chimed overhead, calling for Captain Rowan Hayes to report immediately for crew boarding. He did not move. Victoria's eyes widened as she realized before I did what choice was forming in him. Rowan reached down, picked up his cap, and placed it not on his head, but on the empty seat beside him. The captain's cap on the empty airport seat became the loudest answer Rowan Hayes had ever given his family. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The intercom called his name again, smooth and mechanical, asking Captain Rowan Hayes to report for crew boarding at Gate 52. A year ago, that voice had taken him away from me. Tonight, he looked at the announcement board, then at Luca asleep against my chest, and did not move. Victoria's face went pale beneath her perfect makeup. You cannot simply abandon a scheduled flight. Rowan's mouth tightened. I am not abandoning anyone tonight. The words landed between us with a weight I did not know how to carry. I wanted to believe them, and that made me angry. Belief had once cost me everything. Uncle Grant stepped forward, his expression older than it had been minutes ago. I can call operations. They will assign standby crew. Victoria turned on him. Grant. He did not flinch. The airline will survive a crew change. His eyes moved to Luca, softer now. A child should not have to. That was when my knees nearly gave out. Not because I was weak, but because for 11 months I had been the only wall between Luca and the world. Hearing someone from the Hayes family say he mattered felt like rain falling upward. Rowan noticed the way I shifted under Luca's weight. May I get you a chair? He asked. Such an ordinary question. Such a strange ache. I nodded once. He moved slowly, pulling a seat near, but not too near, careful with every inch of space as if my trust were glass. I sat with Luca in my arms, and the exhaustion I had been outrunning since Newark finally caught me. My diaper bag slid from my shoulder to the floor. Rowan bent to pick it up, then stopped and looked at me again. Permission. Always permission now. I hated that it was working. Yes, I said quietly. He lifted the bag and set it beside me. Victoria watched the exchange like it offended her more than any accusation. This sentimentality is exactly why I intervened, she said. He is a Hayes heir. He requires structure, security, a proper household. My hand tightened around Luca's blanket. Rowan's scent sharpened, then softened immediately when Luca stirred. He mastered himself for our son before answering his mother. He has a proper household. It is wherever Elias has kept him safe. My breath caught. Victoria laughed once, small and cold. Safe? In a rented apartment across state lines? Working overnight pharmacy shifts? Hiding from medical registries? That is not safety. That is instability. Shame rose hot in my throat before I could stop it. She had named pieces of my life like charges in court. The cracked apartment window I sealed with plastic in winter. The second-hand crib. The coupons folded in my wallet. The clinic visits paid in cash. I felt every passenger's eyes on me again, and for a moment I was back under the departure sign, 24, and humiliated. Then Rowan stepped into the space between her words and my silence. You were watching them. Victoria's expression stilled. Rowan took one step toward her, not threatening, simply certain. You just listed details no one in this airport should know. Uncle Grant looked at her sharply. The gate agent's fingers paused over the keyboard. Victoria's perfume went bitter. I had to assess risk. You surveilled my son. I protected our legacy. You stalked a struggling Omega and an infant because you were afraid of a birth certificate. His voice did not rise, and that made it stronger. Lucas stirred again, face turning toward him. Rowan stopped speaking until our baby settled. That tiny pause broke me more than any apology could have. He was learning Luca in real time. Not as evidence. Not as scandal. As a child. My child. His child. Victoria reached into her handbag and removed a slim folder. Then let us discuss this like adults. I have prepared temporary guardianship options. Elias may retain supervised contact while the family determines what is appropriate. The floor seemed to vanish beneath my feet. I stood so fast the chair scraped back. Luca woke with a startled cry. No one word. Not loud. Not polished. But it came from the part of me that had carried him through fevers and hunger and fear. No one is taking my son. Rowan turned toward me, and whatever he saw in my face made his own go still. Then he faced Victoria and held out his hand. Give me the folder. She hesitated. Rowan. Now. Slowly, she placed it in his palm. He opened it, read the first page, and the last softness left his eyes. You filed this before tonight. Victoria said nothing. He looked at the date. 3 weeks ago. My blood went cold. 3 weeks ago, before the delay, before gate 47, before Luca's cry filled the air. Rowan closed the folder with careful hands and looked at me. Elias, he said, voice low and shaken. She was coming for him whether I found out or not. The folder in Rowan's hand made every sound at gate 47 feel far away. The boarding calls, the rain against the glass, the wheels of passing suitcases, even Luca's frightened breathing faded beneath the truth printed on those pages. Temporary guardianship. Emergency review. Concerns regarding Omega instability. My life had been reduced to paragraphs before anyone had even looked me in the eyes. Rowan read another line, and his expression went colder than the runway lights. You contacted family court. Victoria lifted her chin. I consulted legal options. You built a case against Elias before confirming Luca was mine. I built a case to protect a Hayes child from uncertainty. His name is Luca Bennett, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through both of them. He is not a Hayes file. Rowan looked at me then, and something in his eyes softened around the edges. Luca Bennett. He repeated, like he was learning the shape of the name properly, not trying to take it apart. Victoria's mouth tightened. That can be corrected. My whole body went still. Rowan closed the folder with one hand. No, it cannot. Rowan, you are emotional. I am informed. He turned toward the gate agent. I need airport security here, and I need a private room with cameras. I want everything documented. Victoria laughed softly. You would summon security on your own mother? I am asking for witnesses because I finally understand how you work. Uncle Grant moved beside Rowan, his old face grim. I will stay as witness. The gate agent nodded and picked up the phone. For a moment, Victoria looked at the crowd, perhaps expecting loyalty to rise around her like a curtain. It did not. The passengers who had watched me be cornered now watched her with open discomfort. A young mother near the window pulled her toddler closer. A flight attendant folded her arms. Even the businessman who had been grumbling about the delay stared at Victoria like she had become the inconvenience. Luca began to cry again, not loudly, but with a tired, trembling rhythm that broke my heart. I bounced him gently, whispering his name against his hair. "It is okay, baby. I have you." But my scent was shaking, and he knew it. His small hands pushed against my chest, reaching blindly toward the cedarwood calm across from us. Rowan saw it and did not move. "Elias," he said, barely above a whisper. "May I help?" The question hurt. The answer hurt more. I looked down at Luca's flushed face, at the little mouth quivering from exhaustion, at the 11 months I had spent being enough because there was no one else. Then I looked at Rowan, who had failed us once, but was standing still now when every announcement begged him to leave. "You can stand closer," I said. His breath caught. He stepped forward slowly, stopping at my side, close enough for Luca to feel him, but not close enough to crowd me. Rowan lowered his scent until the cedarwood and cold air became gentle, like a blanket warmed by sunlight. Luca's cries softened. His eyelids fluttered. He reached out with one tiny hand and caught the edge of Rowan's uniform sleeve. Rowan stared at that little fist like it had anchored him to the earth. "He likes your jacket," I said before I could stop myself. Rowan's mouth trembled. "It is as if he wants it." The sentence was ridiculous. The jacket probably cost more than my monthly rent. But Luca sighed, cheek resting against my shoulder, fingers still wrapped around the sleeve, and the entire gate seemed to exhale with him. Security arrived with 2 airport supervisors and a woman from airline operations. Rowan handed over the folder, the printed message record, and his own crew authorization badge. He spoke clearly, carefully, without drama. He explained that his private line had been accessed without permission, that a guardianship document had been prepared against the parent of his child without his knowledge, and that he wanted all communication preserved. Victoria tried to interrupt twice. Both times, Rowan said, "Let them record it." Watching him stand there, choosing documentation over dominance, truth over family polish, I felt something inside me shift. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the beginning of a world where I was not the only adult protecting Luca. Then the airline operations woman approached Rowan with a tablet. "Captain Hayes, standby crew is ready. If you are removing yourself from Flight 218, I need your formal confirmation." Victoria's eyes flashed with desperate hope. Flying had always been Rowan's language, his escape, his identity. The terminal waited. I waited. Rowan looked at the tablet, then at Luca's hand still holding his sleeve. "Confirmed," he said. "I am not flying tonight." The tablet beeped. Somewhere down the terminal, a crew door opened for someone else. Rowan removed his Silver Wings pin from his jacket and placed it beside his captain's cap on the empty seat. Victoria whispered, "You are throwing away everything." Rowan looked at our sleeping son and answered, "No, I am finally staying for it." The Silver Wings pin looked too small to change a life, but when Rowan placed it beside his captain's cap, something inside Gate 47 shifted. It was not forgiveness. It was not a miracle. It was a door that had been locked for a year opening just enough for air to enter. Luca slept with his tiny fist still wrapped around the edge of Rowan's sleeve, his breathing finally even, his scent soft and warm against my chest. Around us, airport security guided Victoria toward a private room with glass walls and a recording camera above the door. She did not struggle. Women like Victoria Hayes did not need to raise their voices to make people afraid. She simply looked at me as she passed, and for 1 second, I saw the promise in her eyes. This was not over because she had been caught. It was only over when she had no more doors left to open. Rowan saw that look too. His body angled slightly between us, but he did not block my view. Maybe he understood now that protection did not mean hiding me behind him. It meant standing close enough that I could choose whether to fight or breathe. Uncle Grant remained near the gate counter, speaking quietly with the airline operations woman. The young gate agent printed copies of the device record with shaking hands. then tucked them into a folder marked Incident Report. Passengers slowly returned to their own lives, though nobody truly looked away. A delayed flight had turned into something they would tell someone about later in careful voices. The Omega with the baby. The pilot who stayed. The mother with the guardianship papers. I sat back down because my legs had started to tremble, and Rowan noticed without making a scene. "Water?" he asked. I nodded. He walked to the nearby kiosk and bought a bottle, not sending an assistant, not ordering someone else, just standing in line behind a teenager buying gum. The sight was so ordinary that it almost hurt. When he came back, he opened the bottle and handed it to me without letting his fingers brush mine. "Thank you," I said, and the words felt strange between us, small and fragile. Rowan looked at Luca before answering. "I should be thanking you for keeping him safe." I swallowed. I did not have a choice. "You did," he said quietly. "You could have given up." "You did not." I looked away toward the rain-slick runway. Compliments from him felt dangerous, like sunlight on ice. "Do not make me noble because you feel guilty." He accepted that with a slow nod. "You are right." Silence settled again, but this one was different. Less like a verdict, more like a waiting room. Luca stirred, his lashes fluttering, and Rowan's entire expression changed. He did not reach. He simply watched, hungry for details he had missed. "What is he like?" he asked. I almost asked why he wanted to know. Then I looked at the sleeping baby between us and decided Luca deserved a father who knew more than blood. Blueberry applesauce. The cheap kind, not the organic pouches. Rowan listened like I was giving him flight coordinates. He hates socks. He pulls them off in the stroller and throws them at strangers. A faint, broken smile touched Rowan's mouth. "That sounds fair. He sleeps better with the washing machine running. He likes the sound." "And his middle name?" My fingers tightened around the water bottle. "James. After my grandfather. He used to fix radios in Queens. He raised me after my parents moved west." Rowan nodded, absorbing the boundary inside the answer. Luca Bennett James was not a blank space waiting for Hayes to fill it. He was already loved, already named, already somebody. The private room door opened across the gate. Victoria sat inside at a table, posture perfect, speaking to a security supervisor as if she were the one conducting the interview. Then she looked through the glass at Rowan and lifted her phone. His phone vibrated once. He checked the screen, and the softness left his face. "What is it?" I asked. He turned the phone so I could see. "One message from Victoria. You can still correct this before the court sees what you are protecting." Beneath it was a photograph of me leaving a Newark clinic months earlier, Luca bundled against my chest, both of us unaware we were being watched. My stomach dropped. Rowan looked toward the private room, then back at me. "Elias," he said, voice steady but dark with realization. "She has been building more than a custody case." The photograph on Rowan's phone made the airport feel colder than the storm outside. I knew that clinic doorway. I knew the cracked brick wall, the faded sign for pediatric checkups, the bus stop where I had stood with Luca under my coat because the rain had come sideways that afternoon. He had been 6 months old, feverish and heavy against my chest, one tiny hand gripping my shirt while I counted the dollars left in my wallet and prayed the pharmacy would accept my coupon. I had felt watched that day. I remembered looking over my shoulder and seeing only traffic, umbrellas, and a black car idling half a block away. I had told myself fear made ghosts out of ordinary things. Now the ghost was glowing on Rowan's screen. "She followed us," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone standing several gates away. Rowan's hand tightened around the phone, but his scent stayed low for Luca. That control, that carefulness, was starting to hurt in a different way. It showed me the father he could have been if truth had reached him before pride and lies did. "Not just followed," he said. "Documented." He enlarged the photograph, and my stomach turned. There was a timestamp in the corner, a location tag, a file label that read Stability Review, Subject Bennett. Subject. Not father. Not parent. Not person. Subject. Uncle Grant came back from the counter with the printed records in his hand and stopped when he saw Rowan's face. "What now?" Rowan showed him the phone. Grant's expression collapsed into something like shame. I did not know. I looked at him, and for the first time, I believed a Hayes when he said those words. Not because it changed anything, but because his regret had no polish on it. The young gate agent spoke from behind the counter, voice shaking but determined. Captain Hayes, if those files were stored through the family office, security can preserve the metadata before anything is deleted. Victoria's head turned inside the glass room. Even from across the gate, she seemed to hear the danger in that sentence. Rowan nodded. Do it. The agent looked nervous. I need authorization from an executive account. Use mine. Your mother may still have override access. Rowan's eyes went to Victoria. Then lock her out. The operations woman stepped forward, tablet in hand. I can request an emergency administrative freeze due to an active security investigation. Victoria stood behind the glass, one hand flat on the table now. Her perfect calm had begun to crack into urgency. I held Luca closer. He had woken, but he was quiet, blinking at the lights with the soft confusion of a baby who did not know adults had built a storm around him. Rowan crouched beside my chair, still not touching either of us. Elias, I need to ask, did you receive anything else? Any letters, checks, visits, calls? The memories came like luggage from a broken carousel, one after another. The cashier's check, the note under the door, the social worker who came by after an anonymous concern and left apologizing because my apartment was small but spotless, Luca's vaccination chart taped neatly to the fridge, the landlord who suddenly refused to renew unless I paid 2 months extra, the clinic receptionist who whispered that someone had requested copies of my baby's records using a family law firm name. I had survived each thing by telling myself it was random cruelty. It had been a net. Yes, I said. Rowan closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, his voice was calm enough to be devastating. Then we record your statement now, before she can call anyone. Security moved us to a private waiting room near the gate, glass-walled, bright, and quiet. I sat with Luca on my lap while Rowan stayed beside the door, giving me the chair farthest from the hallway. Not trapping me, guarding the exit. I told them everything. No sobbing, no performance. Just dates, places, envelopes, clinic names, the rent notice, the check I tore up, the message that had broken me. The more I spoke, the more Rowan changed. Not louder, not colder, more still, like an aircraft holding steady through a storm because everyone on board needed the pilot not to panic. When I finished, Luca reached for him again. This time, I did not pull back. Rowan looked at me, and I nodded. He touched one careful finger to Luca's tiny hand. Our baby sighed and leaned toward him, scent settling into cedarwood warmth. Behind the glass, Victoria watched her control disappear in real time. Then the gate agent rushed in with a printed file, pale but triumphant. We found the archive, she said. There are signed instructions from Victoria Hayes authorizing surveillance, message access, and a draft petition for removal before the child was even born. Rowan took the file, but he looked at me when he spoke. This ends tonight. Rowan did not raise his voice when he ended his mother's power over us. That was what made it final. In the glass-walled waiting room near gate 47, with Luca half asleep against my chest and rain silvering the runway beyond the windows, Rowan placed the printed archive beside the guardianship folder and looked at the security supervisor, the airline operations manager, and Uncle Grant. Preserve every file. Suspend her access to all Hayes Aviation family systems. Notify legal that I am filing a formal complaint for unauthorized access, harassment, and interference with a parent and child. Victoria stood on the other side of the glass, still elegant, still upright, but there was no throne left beneath her. Rowan, she said through the open door, her voice thinner than before, you are choosing sentiment over blood. He looked at Luca, then at me. No, he said, I am choosing my blood over your pride. The silence afterward felt cleaner than any apology. Airport security escorted Victoria away to give a formal statement. She did not look back at me. Maybe she could not. Maybe seeing me still holding my son, still standing, still not erased, was the one humiliation she had never prepared for. The Chicago flight began boarding without us. The screen above the gate turned from delayed to boarding, and for a moment I stared at it the way I had stared 1 year ago at another departures board, waiting for someone who never came back. My suitcase stood beside my chair. My ticket was still in my pocket. I could leave. I had built a life out of leaving before I could be left again. Rowan seemed to understand the thought before I spoke it. You can still go, he said quietly. I will not stop you. My throat tightened. That is new. Pain crossed his face, but he accepted it. It should not have taken me this long to learn. Luca shifted, waking enough to make a soft sound. Rowan's hand twitched, then stilled. Permission. Always permission now. I looked at my son, at the tiny fingers curled in my hoodie, at the faint cedarwood scent that had once terrified me because it meant the world could find us. Tonight, that same scent had saved us. You can hold him, I said. Rowan went still. Are you sure? No, I answered honestly. But he is. I passed Luca into his arms. Rowan held him like he was holding a flight recorder recovered from a storm, precious and breakable and full of the truth he had missed. Luca blinked up at him, then tucked his face against Rowan's uniform shirt with a sleepy sigh. The Alpha pilot who had crossed oceans without fear closed his eyes, as if one baby's trust had finally brought him to his knees. I am sorry, he whispered, not to the crowd, not to his family, but to our son. I should have been there for your first breath. I looked away because my own tears had arrived quietly, and I did not want to give them to the airport. Months did not heal us quickly. Truth did not become home overnight. There were statements, hearings, apologies I did not always accept, and a DNA test that only confirmed what Luca's scent had already told the whole terminal. Victoria lost her authority in Hayes Aviation, and her petition was dismissed before it could touch my son. Uncle Grant helped restore the records she had hidden. Rowan took leave from flying, not because I asked, but because he said the first route he needed to learn was the one between Luca's crib and the kitchen at 3 in the morning. He moved into a modest apartment 10 minutes from ours in Newark, not the Hayes estate, not a penthouse, not a place that could swallow us with money. He showed up with diapers, groceries, and a notebook full of questions. What temperature did Luca like his bath? Which lullaby worked? How small should the carrots be cut? He learned clumsily, patiently, without demanding forgiveness as payment. And slowly, I stopped bracing every time his name appeared on my phone. 1 year later, we returned to JFK, not to run, not to prove anything, but because Rowan had been cleared to fly again and wanted us there before his first departure. Gate 47 looked ordinary in the morning sun. Travelers hurried past, coffee steamed in paper cups, and Luca toddled between us in tiny sneakers, one hand in mine and one hand in Rowan's. The departures board flickered above us. Rowan knelt, not in shame this time, but to zip Luca's jacket. I will be back tonight, he told him. Luca patted the silver wings on his father's chest and said, to fly, to come home. Rowan looked up at me, and the old pain was still there, but it no longer owned the whole sky. Always, he said. The boarding call sounded. This time, I was not left beneath it. This time, Rowan kissed Luca's forehead, squeezed my hand once, and walked toward the crew door only after looking back to make sure we were still there, waiting by choice. And when the plane lifted into the bright New York morning, Luca laughed in my arms, his scent warm with cedarwood and sunlight, because he finally knew the difference between a man who leaves and a father who comes home.